This is from news.yahoo.com. The White House has acknowledged for the first time that the strict standards that President Obama imposed last year to prevent civilian deaths from U.S. drone strikes will not apply to U.S. military operations in Syria and Iraq. So,
okay.
There's all kinds of terrible news out about how the United States was killing 49 innocent people for every one terrorist. They were doing things that were called double taps, where they would drop a bomb. Some people would be harmed, others would rush in to
like
help.
An ambulance or something.
Yeah, and then they'd drop a bomb again. These are horrifyingly. These are evil things to do. That's the best term I can come up with.
This was done under these tight restrictions. Okay.
Those things were done, and then the Obama administration's like, well, we'll just go ahead and we'll put some restrictions on how we do the bombing thing.
It's PR. It's a PR move, and now they're quietly removing them. It seems.
Well, it's not that quiet.
No?
It's in several news items have been on, featured this.
Why was this necessary? Well, I wonder what their excuse is.
Well, we'll read on.
We just really need to kill some more innocents. Those terrorists, they're hiding amongst the innocents, and the only way we can do this without sending in ground troops, we got to save the American lives, is to just bomb everybody. I mean, what are they saying?
A White House statement to Yahoo News confirming the looser policy came in response to questions about reports that as many as a dozen civilians, including women and young children, were killed when a Tomahawk missile struck the village of Kafir Daryan in Syria's Idlib province in the morning of September the 23rd. The village was described by Syrian rebel commanders as a reported stronghold of the al-Qaeda-linked Nusra
Front.
Yeah, where U.S. officials believed members of the so-called
we will be very careful to not bomb civilians unless they are among a stronghold. So, therefore, they'll just label everything a stronghold, right? It's a stronghold. We need to bomb it.
Yeah, as long as it's a stronghold, it's fine. Khorasan group, they were plotting attacks against international aircraft. So people were there that were, plotting terrible things about.
So they claim.
International aircraft is the claim. Of course, they're going to attack civilians and not military aircraft, which is up there flying too. Why would they want to go for the civilian aircraft? Whatever. At a briefing, so we have to kill some women and children. But a briefing for members and staffers of the House Foreign Affairs Committee late last week, Syrian rebel commanders described women and children being hauled from the rubble after an errant cruise missile destroyed a home for displaced civilians. Images of badly injured children also appeared on YouTube, helping to fuel anti-U.S. protests in a number of Syrian villages last week. Now, I'm always curious about the blowback people, the people that are anti-blowback. Like, no, the people in the Middle East hate us for our freedoms. Why was there a protest? If people in the Middle East hate you for your freedoms, why was there a protest about an errant Tomahawk missile killing children? They shouldn't protest if they're not willing to kill you for decades of intervention in the Middle East that you have largely ignored and gone on with your life about. Then why in the world would they bother having a protest? They don't care about those things, right? They don't care about their children. They don't care about their husbands. They don't care about their wives. They care about Britney Spears showing too much cleavage. They care about your Christian religion. For God's sakes, they care which holy book you have. That's why they want to kill you, for God's sakes. It has nothing to do with their dead moms.
I do. I think that this might have been what Cantley was talking about here. You're talking about this area. I lost the name, but he had mentioned that it wasn't us that killed these Christian women and children and whatnot.
Us being ISIS.
Yeah, that's what Cantley said in the video. That it wasn't them who had killed these Christian women and children. And apparently, I wonder if this is what he's referring to. This bombing strike in Syria.
I don't know.
I'm not sure of the timeline of
these were
that.
displaced civilians, so I imagine that most of them were Muslim, would be my guess. So anyway, going on, it says here that I saw 7 or 8 ambulances coming out of there, said Abu Abdu Salambram, a political member of one of the Free Syrian Army factions who attended a briefing for Foreign Affairs Committee members and staff. We believe this was a big mistake. They were carrying bodies out of the rubble. And so asked about the strike at Kafir Duran, a U.S. Central Command spokesman on Tuesday, said that the U.S. military did target a Khorasan group compound near this location. However, we have seen no evidence at this time to corroborate claims of civilian casualties.
So just to clarify, what you're saying is this bombing happened, the Free Syrian Army, which was talked about in the ISIS video we played in the last hour, they've got members who are saying, look, we saw innocent people bombed by these U.S. bombs. The U.S. military saying, no, there's no evidence for that. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Yeah, well, at this point, they're saying we're taking all accusations, that are credible seriously, but
that they've seen no evidence for the bombing. So on one hand, you've got guys on the ground saying, yeah, you just killed a bunch of women and children, and the U.S. military's response is, no, we didn't.
They're guys
and the guys who are saying it are the guys that they're about to send a whole bunch of weapons to.
Yeah.
Their guys on the ground are saying that this occurred. And
their guys meaning the Free Syrian Army.
The Free Syrian Army. Well,
Which is the U.S. teaming up with these guys to supposedly prosecute
that's what they do.
war.
Don't worry, we'll be fighting them in 3 years.
Yeah, these are the moderate rebels who are violently overthrowing their government.
shouldn't say
Well, if they were moderate before, as soon as they kill some more of their women and children,
they're
going to
get really moderate.
Yeah.
So the White House says that the much publicized White House policy that President Obama announced last year, barring U.S. drone strikes unless there's a near certainty there will be no civilian casualties, the highest standard we can meet, he said at the time, does not cover the current U.S. airstrikes in Iraq and Syria. No. Sorry about that. That's new. That doesn't apply.
So it did apply, but now it doesn't, or it never applied.
It did apply. I mean, no, it did not apply. This is now a war.
Yeah.
This isn't just our normal bombing of peaceful places.
I've not bombed anyone.
This is a war of. This is a bombing in a wartime situation.
Gotcha.
So those really strict standards that really didn't pan out so well from the get-go, these have now been taken off the table, and so the really the really safe drone bombings that were happening that were killing innocent women and children are about to become a great deal less safe, apparently.
Or apparently not about to, but what I'm hearing is that ever since Obama's statement about going into Syria, they've just been bombing whatever the hell they want.
Yeah.
That's what I'm understanding from this?
Well, they've been.
I think it's always been that way, but now they're not even trying to pave it over with sugar. They're just like, hey, guess what? We're a bunch of murderous thugs, and you can take it or leave it.
Well, they say like all U.S. military operations are being conducted. These are being conducted consistent with laws of armed conflict and proportionality and distinction.
Just take their word for it. Clearly, they
don't even believe that they did it.
Right,
proportionality, that's an interesting one.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, you believe the government when they make claims, right? I mean, so they're following their own. Oh, wait, no. We've got all kinds of evidence that the government doesn't even follow their own laws. They're claiming they're following some sort of conflict law. But who can really prove that statement's true? It's just a claim.
Well, I would sincerely hope that most people in the U.S. military wouldn't just go ahead and bomb civilian targets unless they believe that there was some terrorist hiding amongst them.
What the hell makes you think they wouldn't do that?
I don't think that they would just go ahead and bomb civilians.
Do whatever the hell they're told to do.
Yeah, I don't think that there's any thought process there for the soldiers. The soldiers are told to go bomb something. They might be presuming that they're ordered to go bomb something because it's a legitimate military target.
Indeed.
But they have no concept of this stuff. They have no idea what they're shooting at. They're just like, hey, go kill these guys. And
there's
they're like,
terrorists hiding in that hospital.
That's what I mean.
We're talking about the bombings going on over in Syria. They're not happening here in America, thank goodness. But, and that's one of the things is that Americans are more tolerant towards bombings, as we were discussing bombing videos versus beheading videos and why people care about one but not the other. There's also this sort of ethnocentrism of, oh, well, they're not humans. They're not as good as us folks here in America. That's, I think, a common perspective. Whether or not people would admit to it is another point.
Yeah, I don't think it would be easy to do stuff like this to English-speaking Europeans.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think that they did do things like that. They bombed Dresden. What it is it's about well, I guess they're not English-speaking there. I'm sure they did some terrible things to Canadians and Britons during the Revolutionary War and the War of 1812. But it's a tribal thing. It's humans do this. They say, this is our team, that's their team. And everything's that's done to our team is bad and everything that's done to their team is fine because they have the wrong religion, they eat the wrong foods, they look the wrong way, they act the wrong way, they treat their children the wrong way, they do all kinds of things the wrong way, so the things that we do to them are fine.
Not to mention all those weird hats.
Yeah, hats are important.
Your hats.
Now, Mark has been sharing with us a story, and what, by the way, is the source on this?
Yahoo
story?
News.
Yahoo News. About the Syrian bombings that have been going on, where apparently there was some statement made earlier this year about how, well, we've got tight standards now. We're implementing tight standards on what can and can't be bombed as far as civilian targets. And apparently none of those standards apply anymore and haven't applied since the beginnings of the earnest bombings in Syria as of a couple weeks ago. And so now more innocent people will be able to be killed without any sort of question whatsoever. That's the news.
Which makes the job a lot easier for the people who have to do the killing. I mean, if you're going to be like, hey, are there innocent people over here? And you're not really sure who your enemy is anymore because you've pissed off such a huge portion of a population, it makes it a lot easier when you could just indiscriminately kill.
Yep, and that's what they're going to do. The suggestion or the question was brought up by Mark. Well, wouldn't these American military members not bomb innocent people if they knew they were bombing innocent people? And I think that is an important question, but I don't believe that they wouldn't. I think that they would absolutely do anything they were told to do. Maybe some would do it begrudgingly. Maybe they would complain or gripe about it. Maybe they would feel sad as a result of what they had done. But ultimately, their job is to do what they're told. And if we actually had any level of disobedience among the military, we'd see more news stories about people saying, yeah, I'm not doing this. This is sick. This is wrong. And we're bailing out of this. Forget this.
If police in the United States are willing to kill people over plant material, then you could imagine that soldiers in a foreign war zone are not going to be too discriminatory, frankly.
Especially when they've been told these are bad guys.
The discriminatory thing is one thing. Somebody weighs in their mind how bad is the bad guy in that building that has 10 kids in it. They say to themselves, okay, well, those kids will probably grow up to be terrorists or whatever, so it's worth it to get the bad guy. That's one thing. But to say, to suggest, and I do not believe for a second that this is the case, that somebody says, what would be a good idea? Let's use a $1.5 million Tomahawk missile to blow up this house with just 10 kids in it because they might grow up to be terrorists. I mean, that's a terrible idea.
No one's going to tell that, even if they knew.
No,
that the
I know.
house
That's why.
Right.
Like, it's stupid to suggest that would be the idea because they'll never do that. The commanding officer will always be of the opinion that the bad guy's there, the bad guy's worth getting. Yeah. This is what we have to do.
We've got intelligence from on the ground that says there's a terrorist hiding in that school.
They won't mention that kids are there. Yeah, the kids are evacuated. They'll say and do whatever they need to do to get the building blown up because the average person doesn't want to do that.
Well,
that's all I'm saying.
And what passes for intelligence at this point is that some source within the community or something tells you that there's some problem there, right? Yeah. And so that could be anything from somebody who owes somebody money, says, "Oh, hey, the guy I owe money to, he's plotting attacks on the United States," and next thing you know, he's out of debt because a Tomahawk missile dropped on his neighbor.
Exactly. Is there more from this story, Mark, that you want to share that's worth sharing?
There's. I've actually had to move around because you suggested that this was earlier this year, and I couldn't figure out whether
was it not
the more strict things went in last year or this year. But I don't think they've been around for much more than a year. So questions about civilian deaths from U.S. counterterrorism operations have confronted the Obama administration from the onset after the president sharply ramped up drone strikes in Pakistan and Yemen, resulting sometimes in heated internal policy debates. Addressing the subject last year in a speech at the National Defense University, Obama acknowledged for the first time that U.S. airstrikes have resulted in civilian casualties, adding, "For me and for those in my chain of command, those deaths will haunt us for as long as we live." Sources familiar with the new near certainty standard Obama announced at the time, so this was last year that it was announced, said that it was, as a practical matter, it meant that every drone strike had to be signed off at the White House. First by Lisa Monaco, Obama's chief Homeland Security advisor, and then ultimately by the president himself. The policy, one source said, caused some Pentagon officials to chafe at the new restrictions and led to a noticeable reduction in such strikes by the military and the CIA. If all of these strikes were righteous before, Why? Did the number decrease that the the president of the ones presented to the president to sign?
That's a good point, I think, because if they're excuse me, so if they're clearly in a situation where they're saying, well, all our strikes are justified and we're doing everything that we can to avoid civilian casualties, and I mean they've been saying that from the outset of the thing, right?
Sure.
I mean, from the moment that they go into Afghanistan, they always talk about, hey, we're going to do everything that we can to reduce civilian casualties because that's not what we're there to do. We're there to fight their government, not them, yada yada yada. Well, clearly not, right? Because as soon as you implement some minor restriction, just you have to get approval from somebody in order to do this, well, all of a sudden the number of strikes that you do drop because you don't want to you don't have even near certainty, which qualified as near certainty prior to this order, right? But you presumably, if the standard is near certainty, and you've been saying from the outset that you're going to do what you can to reduce civilian deaths, and then you're met with a near certainty standard, and your number drops, well, it would stand to reason that you didn't have near certainty prior.
Yeah, you don't know what near certainty is. No. So, yeah, I mean, I find it very disturbing. So while the White House has said little about the standards it is using for strikes in Syria and Iraq, one former official who has been briefed on the matter said the looser policy gives more discretion to theater commanders of the U.S. Central Command to select targets without the same level of White House oversight. If you throw 250 Tomahawk missiles into a given theater of battle, you're going to miss. You're going to hit women and children. This is the reality. If I went out and I started shooting after some criminal that had harmed me at my house and I killed some baby in a carriage, I'd be called a murderer.
Discussing the bombings that are and have gone on in Syria. Also Iraq. They apparently had put on some kind of some sort of extra standards regarding what can and can't be bombed or could not be bombed in the past. And those standards have been lifted. And presumably they've been lifted as of a few weeks ago. Not real clear on the dates of all of this. But regardless, they no longer exist, and the U.S. military can now bomb whatever they want to bomb, whenever they want to bomb it, and all they have to do is claim that, there's terrorists. They're terrorists! We've got to bomb these schools and hospitals or houses. And so Mark is sharing that story with us. We'll continue. So, Mark, you've been sharing with us this story from Yahoo News about the lifted restrictions, whatever they were, on bombing innocent people in Syria and Iraq. There was a mention in the article that it's both Syria and Iraq.
That's right.
What else?
They just say Syria in the headline, and I think
the story.
So that's and a lot of people just read the headline. I've got to say, I admit most news stories I pass by, I just read the headline. I keep abreast of the news through headlines to some extent.
I only have so much time, we don't have professional producers to do that job for us.
It still wouldn't keep me abreast of the news, even if professional, if that's somebody else read a story, somebody else read the story that I just read a headline on. So you only have so much information in your life that you can cull through.
Do you feel like there's more in this story you want to share?
I think that there's one interesting piece here. So, there are a couple of throwaway paragraphs here. I don't think it's worth the trouble. But at least one of the House members present, Representative Adam Kinzinger, an Illinois Republican, supports stronger U.S. action in Syria. He said he was not overly concerned. I did not hear them say that there were civilian casualties, but I didn't get the details, Kinzinger said in an interview with Yahoo News. But nothing's perfect. Whatever civilian deaths resulted from the U.S. strikes are much less than the brutality of the Assad regime. And, okay, so what business is it of yours and mine how brutal the Assad regime was to its civilians? Trust me, if everybody in Syria rose up, enough people in Syria rose up to take down Assad, they could.
Yeah.
Now, obviously he's got people on his side, but that's what democracy is, right? Like a majority of people do whatever the hell they want to a minority of people.
Yeah, it sums it up.
Okay, fine. So I'm not saying that I like any of this stuff. I'm just saying let's look back. We don't have to even look far. We can look inside this millennium, which is rather short. This nascent millennium that we have here. We can see what happened when the United States decided to go after a terrible despotic ruler in the one Saddam Hussein. Well, that country has been in turmoil since, and now we're dealing with ramifications from that action again. Here's a little lesson for you. yes, Assad's bad. And, whatever bombing. By the way, they're fighting ISIS in Iraq and Assad in Syria?
They're fighting Assad and ISIS in Syria, is my understanding of it.
Oh, boy. Yeah.
By arming ISIS in Syria, apparently. That's the way. See, the thing is that the United States military is so powerful that they have to give weapons to their enemies before they attack them, just to, sort of even things up.
To make it
I
fair.
think. Yeah, they just don't want to go and, punch a man with glasses on or something like that. They've got to give him a rocket launcher and then blow him up with a tomahawk.
So that's it.
Okay.
The Republican is not that concerned about civilian deaths. I didn't hear anything about that, but I wasn't listening that closely.
Free Talk Live, 7 nights a week from 7 to 10 Eastern, live on the Liberty Radio Network at LRN.FM.